Hello and welcome to What the Tech from Boast AI, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. I'm Paul Davenport, Boast Head of Content, and today I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Daniel Rizzi, co-founder and general counsel at WeWatch. Daniel's mission is to help make the world a safer place without compromising people's data privacy or freedoms. To do so, he's embarked on a unique social enterprise with WeWatch that essentially harnesses the power of community for social and criminal justice. With the WeWatch app, users can find people who are nearby and witnessed when a specific incident, take for instance a vehicle collision, occurs, enabling the users to contact the witnesses to see if they can share observations or media related to the event. From there, users can consolidate relevant information and media in the WeWatch app, helping them obtain recourse in conjunction with concerned parties and authorities. It's a truly innovative and very timely solution that can be a silver bullet for numerous scenarios. But while Daniel is a co-founder in his own right, he's also an advisor to founders across Canada, helping them raise the capital they need to scale while navigating around any potential legal roadblocks to their success. So I can't wait to get his take on the startup scene today, the work he's doing at WeWatch, and what's on the horizon. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I might actually have to steal that intro you gave for me. That's probably the best one I've ever heard.
Oh, well, that is music to my ears. I always like flattering our guests at the top, so happy to hear it. And by all means, take it and use it as you see fit. But before we dive in and get too ahead of ourselves, I always love asking our guests, tell me a little bit about your background. Where are you based and how did you get into the startup scene in the first place?
For sure. So I'm based in Toronto. I'm living on the Danforth currently, and we have, for the law practice side, I have office space at the Eaton Center. But how did I get into tech? I love learning. And kind of as a kid, I kind of just always loved technology. You know, we had the computer in the living room, and that's how I got started. And I found in the tech world, there's very little corporate politics for the early stage startups. People they want to build, they want to get things done, they want to figure things out. And I just really resonate with that. And I learned how to code in 2020 as well. So tech's always been kind of a part of my life, and it just made total sense to kind of work with people as an adult and, you know, someone in their career.
That's so cool. So you learned to code in 2020. Was that one of those pandemic hobbies that we all took up, or was this a little more mission oriented on your part?
Yeah, I mean, it was something I always wanted to do. And I ended up having some free time because work slowed down with the pandemic, as many people probably saw as well. And I don't know, the perfect opportunity never exists, but it seemed like this was, in fact, the perfect opportunity to do it.
Oh man, yeah. I think I took up a Lego hobby and I wish I did coding instead. I'd probably have a startup at this point. So, as we discussed, you are a lawyer. Your background is in law. You've always had an interest in tech, but you just started learning to code back in 2020. Tell me about how those passions kind of came together and how WeWatch came about.
Yeah, for sure. So I worked at one of Canada's largest IP and tech firms, and the pandemic came in, and I sort of did some soul searching, and I kind of realized I don't want to take this same path that basically everybody at the firm was taking. And I sat down with another colleague of mine who I went to law school with. We had a very long 5-hour conversation, and we had very similar experiences. I was at a large firm, he was at a small firm. So we both decided to start our own law practices together, but kind of like in parallel. So not exactly kind of combined. And I said, well, what types of clients do I want to work with? And I want to work with people in the tech industry for all the reasons I said. They're hungry. They're trying to build. Generally, they have this like good heartedness about them. If I just want to build cool stuff and just hopefully the money comes. And so 6 months into starting my law practice, I met my co-founder at WeWatch, Colin. And I was just in a risk-taking mood. We kind of met over Facebook. He didn't even really have a profile picture, so it was kind of sketchy. But he just posted, hey, I have this great startup idea. I'm looking for a co-founder. We had a few calls, and, you know, I really liked the guy. I thought we'd work together well. And we started working together about 2 years ago now. So I guess I kind of fell into it a bit like that. And I don't recommend finding co-founders off Facebook, but I guess it works sometimes.
I was just going to say, I'm like, that's a very different kind of co-founder union and alignment than what we hear usually on this podcast. A lot of the times it's like, oh, my buddy from middle school, we both went different paths, but we came back because we both found our skill sets in different areas and brought them to the startup. Love to hear that somebody just found you and shared a vision, even if it was a little risky and maybe a little sketch if they didn't have a picture on their Facebook, but still, but you're here now. It clearly worked out well. So that's awesome kind of matchmaking too. Diving now into what you guys are going to be building at WeWatch and what you have built today. Could you give me a little insight into maybe if not the use cases that you envision this would be applied to, but just maybe some scenarios that you think it could make a difference compared to the ways that we do these kinds of community enforcement today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a working MVP built. We have our first paying customer, which is awesome. But essentially, what it does is, let's say an incident happens to you. You're in a car accident. Somebody robs you on the street. Maybe somebody breaks your store window. You can report that incident on the app, and then we'll crowdsource the collection of evidence from people who are nearby who also have the app. And those people can upload pictures, videos, text descriptions of what they might have of what happened to you or kind of related things.
Mhm.
And then all of that gets compiled into an easily shareable report. And you can take that report to the police, take it to insurance, keep it for your own records, kind of whatever you want to do with that. And normally how things work is you call the police when something happens, they come, they collect the evidence from people nearby if they're still around. Maybe they go canvassing a few doors down to get kind of people involved. But you kind of need people to stick around. And it's not very convenient to get this information. People have it on their dash cams and then they have to save it and download it, or, it's on their phone and they left the area. And how are you ever going to find that person again? Probably not. So we're really not using technology to kind of collect this evidence now. And we're kind of doing that no duh step of let's connect people with their smartphone. Everyone has one, everyone knows how to use them. And let's try and get some of these more unreported crimes reported, and let's get you some evidence for that.
That's awesome. Okay. So I think you struck too a question I was kind of dancing around. It is ultimately to get those unreported crimes and accountability in order, because right now a lot's happening that goes unreported and that there just isn't justice there. So, like you said, the obvious thing is we all have our cell phones on us. A lot of us have dash cams. There's media being collected all around us. How do you envision WeWatch maybe taking off an adoption? I mean, getting onto everybody's cell phone and getting into those environments where people can actually collaborate and share their media related to these incidents?
Yeah, for sure. So right now we work with business improvement areas, BIAs, which are government organizations that are created by the municipal city government, but their budget is fully funded by businesses on main streets. So our first customer we're working with is West Queen Street West, the BIA there. And the BIA pays us a licensing fee, and we give the app to the business owners on the main street and their employees. So to kind of just start the growth trajectory, we're again going BIA to BIA once we're finished our first pilot, and we're getting the app into the hands of the business owners and their employees, and they have that clear nexus of, okay, I work at a cafe on the street, or I'm a hotel worker, or I work at the bar, so we know they're going to be there to be able to report incidents. And the businesses are obviously there physically, and they definitely want to know if their neighbor gets robbed or things like that. And they might have security camera footage to share. Those the bartenders when they're going home at 2 or 3 a.m. There's not a lot of people around, so if something happens to them, we want to get the evidence. So ideally, right now, the growth is we expand to every BIA in Toronto, and then potentially BIAs or their equivalent in the US and maybe even globally. And at some point, we might kind of start to do a B2C consumer model where just any random person on the street can download the app. But if we start with that right now, we don't have that critical mass. But if we get a bunch of BIAs, we have people, already using the app. And then if like a random person downloads it, they have the people around them who are already reporting things.
That is amazing. So you actually answered a question that I had. I used to be a bartender when I was in college and after college for a little bit. I don't want to date myself, but 10 years ago, even cell phone cameras weren't that good and people weren't recording everything. And I was thinking about walking home at 3 a.m. and being like, all right, the trains in Boston's closed before 2. So if I saw something suspicious while I was walking home, I can think of things off the top of my head that I had witnessed in the past. And I'm just thinking back, I'm like, I never closed the loop there because I don't know how to close the loop on that. Like, as a member of the former member of the service industry, I really, really appreciate that value add. And my next question was going to be, when do you come to Boston? Because that's where I'm based right now. So it sounds great that you guys are doing it all in Toronto. And I love that kind of BIA by BIA approach too, because there's a lot of business improvement districts here in Boston. We have those across cities in the States too. So I think that is an awesome model too for just getting some organic expansion and meaningful use cases too. I'd love to know a little bit about kind of beyond the BIAs. What other partnerships are you making within the startup community to kind of get WeWatch off the ground?
Yeah, for sure. So we're just keeping it kind of local in Toronto now, just because it makes things easier and we can make all our mistakes in kind of like a smaller market than the broader US. Uh, but my co-founder Colin has done 3 accelerator programs, um, and then these are no funding; they don't take any equity.
Yep.
And we found mentors through that. We've talked to a few VCs, but fundraising is kind of difficult in this higher rate environment with the interest rates being so high.
Oh, yeah.
And they want to see money. They want to see traction. First time founders, they're not so interested in investing in first time founders without a ton of traction. So maybe that'll happen in the future. The accelerators are a really good gateway to meeting more people and sort of getting those connections. And we've been in communication with local authorities. So we've talked to the Toronto Police. We've talked to York Region Police, which are kind of the 2 largest police organizations kind of in Ontario. And the police don't really want to approve or kind of associate themselves with any specific particular tech solution working with communities, but they do have a team in the Toronto Police that deals with kind of community reporting and projects that citizens might have that make sense to work with police, or in communication with them. And it takes a long time to get things done, but we foresee in the future we're going to be working more with them through our once we're finished our pilot, we have this volume of reports that they might be interested in.
That makes perfect sense to me. Now, I think I might have seen this on your website, but did you guys leverage MyTax at all or any other government programs to kind of just help get this off the ground when you guys are building the product?
Yeah, so that's one of the big benefits of being a Canadian company is
Yep.
it's difficult to fundraise in Canada without getting US investors, but there are a lot of these early stage grants. So MyTax is one of them for students to help you out as an intern. And also shred credits, which most tech companies are going to be using to pay for software development. If you're in-house doing software development, you're getting up to 60%, which is, from an investor perspective, I get the investor money, I spend it on software, and then I get 60% of it back to spend on more software, which is a pretty powerful use case. We haven't applied yet. We're still kind of in the process of getting the bookkeeping together and things like that. But the shred is just a huge opportunity for startups here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think a term that we're trying to coin here is the virtuous cycle that Shred tends to introduce, because like you just illustrated, you get that money that you've invested into hiring people or even just embarking on those research and development activities, and then you get it back. And yeah, you can spend it any way you want from there, but then you can put it into more investments of R&D that then you can even recoup even greater. It just builds and builds and builds. And a lot of people too, I know, depending on what region you're doing business in, sure, you graduate out of Shred eventually, but I think at the stage where you're expanding into new markets and you're really building that MVP like you are today, it becomes an increasingly valuable mechanism over the course of the early few years before you hit those kind of major scale up stages. So very happy to hear you guys are exploring that. Again, obviously, that's our bread and butter here at Boast. So we love working with founders like you on projects like that, especially taking kind of the heavy lifting of doing the bookkeeping and just getting the summaries together in language that the CRA will read. It is not something that someone can just do because they built the business necessarily. Someone with experience working with the CRA kind of has to bridge all that. So I'm thrilled to hear you're taking advantage of that program or you're getting started doing that. And also, too, just going back to MyTax of it all, it's not necessarily a program that we have any play in, but I love hearing about companies that work with the education system or work with the university system in Canada, because there's so much great talent up there. And that's where a lot of great founders are born. So awesome program. Happy to hear you're taking part in it. Now, I'd love to know, What's your take on the current state of startups? You're building a high growth startup or potentially high growth startup. You're working in an industry that is hard to define, to be honest. Sure, it's tech, but it's very much a public service. I don't think there's any one to one that I know of that you do. But I mean, navigating this new landscape, what would you say to other founders in your shoes?
Yeah, well, I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. But um, there's kind of two things you're navigating, right? One, you're just navigating like, what am I actually doing as a startup founder? Like, what does that even mean to build a tech startup? Which, what I know now, if I knew that, 2, 3 years ago, we would be a lot farther along. And then the second is the specifics of how do I build my specific idea in my tech. So um, I think being introduced to mentors through the accelerator programs helps you with that initial sense of just like, what is it to build a tech startup? Like, what are the typical types of things that you're going to be doing as a tech startup? But you really don't understand until you kind of go out there and actually do it. So we outsource our software development. So just that whole process, once you've done it once, you understand. But if you've never done it before, that's its own can of worms, which has its difficulties that you don't even know yet because you haven't done it. And then there's like, yeah, like how do you do marketing? How do you find your first customer? How do you reach out to people to find those first few things? And are there laws that you don't even know about that you might be breaking? And for some industries, it's very particular. And then kind of once you have your idea figured out, and then once you maybe have the team together to do everything. I do a lot of product management stuff, and then it's a question of, okay, like what features do I need to build to solve the problem, and are people going to use those features, and are they too complicated, are they too simple? And let's build for the future, but if you build too much for the future, you never get anything done, and you want to get the minimum viable product done. So talk to a lot of people. My advice would be for founders is talk to people more experienced than you, ideally 1 or 2 steps ahead, to just get your head around like, what exactly am I doing? Because that information, you won't absorb it well at first, but as you start working more and more, you'll be like, oh, this person said that, and I'm actually doing that right now, and now I know what to do. And you can go back to them and ask for some more help. So just, you don't know everything, like go talk to people, and people are generally willing to help you with strategic stuff like that. And it's a little abstract at first, but if you talk to enough people, it'll be more clear.
I love that. Talk to people who know more than you. There's always going to be someone out there who knows more than you and is willing to share it too. And you said it when you started answering a question too. Listeners, go to Daniel's LinkedIn. He is a wealth of tips and strategies for founders in general. On that note, actually, too, I know that you do a lot of advising, if not coaching, for other startups. Could you tell me a little bit about what that's looked like in your experience too?
Yeah, for sure. So through a few accelerators, I volunteered my time and I've been matched with a few founders just as a founder to discuss. And also, kind of on the legal side, I am a lawyer that works with tech startups. So, um, if they need some legal services, of course, I'm also going to tell them kind of like what are the norms around share vesting and how much should an advisor get if they're advising a company, and what do fundraise rounds look like? Like, what's the average kind of funding valuation? And a lot of the information on the internet is from the US markets where there's more money floating around, valuations are higher. So, kind of bridging that gap between, again, maybe what a Y Combinator company would be valued at versus kind of just a normal Toronto startup. So, bringing that legal, but also that just very real experience of being an early stage founder and kind of letting people know the norms. And, some people, they talk to an advisor and advisor's like, yeah, I'll take 10% of the company, no problem. And I'm like, well, what's that person doing? And that's probably should actually be below 1%. So maybe 0.25% for an advisor. So just helping people not get ripped off is a big part of it too.
That really emphasizes what we do here at Boast. We are very much a community first organization. We like to think of ourselves as bumping elbows with all of the customers we work with. And honestly, we come across a lot of the same stuff that you mentioned too, just the nuances between the US market versus the Canadian market, beyond even just the tax code, what a US VC is versus a Canadian VC, what it means to be a CCPC and the benefits of that versus establishing in Delaware, for instance, if you want to go that route and look for tax code in the US. So it's a lot to navigate, and it's really something where you need that just knowledge to bridge. You don't have to get bogged down in the details, and you don't have to personally, as a founder, be totally conversant in tax code to succeed and filing for your R&D tax credits. You should be focused on the innovation you want to drive. And I think that's parallel to navigating the legal landscape and all of that.
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned this CCPC.
Yeah.
Founders have this problem of you should be running full speed as fast as you can to kind of build what you need to do. But there's also stuff that you just have no idea about. So a lot of founders, they find, oh, all the money's in the US. Let's just start a Delaware Corp and incorporate and then get that US money and let's get going. But if they're Canadian and they started a Canadian corp and then they do a mix of, okay, I get maybe half the round from US investors and now it's easier to close Canadian investors because I have most of the money committed. There's huge tax benefits for being Canadian owned, Canadian run. And again, like CCPC, like people have never even heard that acronym, right? A privately controlled Canadian company. So they don't even know that they're missing out on a bunch of potential tax benefits. And it's a huge research project to get that figured out. And you probably won't successfully do it yourself if you don't have a background in law or tax or anything like that. So definitely talk to the advisors. I had a call with the founder yesterday and he sat down and he hit me with all these questions. I'm like, man, you did your research. I'm proud of you. This was really good. And it's easier the second time to do all this stuff because you have an idea, like you've heard the terms, you can Google things, but yeah, like it's just people run off to go fundraise and then they miss out on potentially millions of dollars of tax savings or grants they could have got or things like that.
Oh, totally. And there's so many ways you can slice and dice it too. Like if you're based in Quebec, for instance, once you stop capitalizing on the shred, maybe you can go over to CDAE and start leveraging those tax credits. It's a ton of money out there, especially in Canada. And there's just not a lot of knowledge about it. And if you did the research project yourself and turned it around to quiz Daniel, for instance, about what he knows on the topic, that's a lot of effort on your part when you can really find somebody who will help you take care of it too. And I think that's the value that you bring to the companies that you work with, Daniel. It's a lot of the value that we bring here at Post too. We try to make it easier for you to navigate those scenarios and just achieve growth and success. And again, that's regardless of Canada or the US. There are pros and cons to being a startup in either region. I just am so impressed every day with all the non-dilutive funding opportunities here in Canada. So I keep ringing that bell. I think that if you are a founder in Canada, don't look abroad necessarily yet. Really try to make it happen there. And in the US too. That doesn't mean jump over to Canada. You're not going to have the same opportunities that native Canadians are going to have. But I digress. Daniel, this was fantastic. I'm very excited to hear more about WeWatch. I cannot thank you enough. I hope that we have a future newsworthy founder on our show this episode. And yeah, reach out to Daniel on LinkedIn.